Hey guys, Cubby and Brandon here, and we got some comic book reviews for you, so check it out.
YOLO, bro. Hey guys, Brandon here. I got to read Wolverine and the X-Men number 11. This has been an awesome book thus far. It is a tie-in to Avengers versus X-Men. We kind of get to see how the school is playing into this whole fighting with the Avengers and the X-Men, and we really get to see Wolverine's stance on how to deal with Hope and what's going on and all this. Really good story. I'm liking it. I'd pick it up. It's 4 out of 5 Nerd Skulls. I get to read Batman Annual number 1. This is the Mr. Freeze story dealing with the Court of Owls. This kind of shows a new introduction of Mr. Freeze and a new origin, how Bruce Wayne is involved with the creation of Mr. Freeze, and kind of a new spin on the whole everything he's about, you know, with his wife Nora being frozen, and it was pretty interesting. It was a little owl-less. I was hoping to see a lot of Court of Owl stuff. You kind of just find out how Freeze is involved and behind everything in this. But, I mean, it was still a really good story. I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 Nerd Skulls. I got to read Peter Panzerfaust number 4. This has been a really cool story thus far. I really like the original take on Peter and, you know, the whole Neverland thing. We really get to see a lot more of Wendy and where she's from and how she's dealing with the whole war and everything. I've enjoyed this a lot, way more than I ever thought I would. I'm giving this 4.5 out of 5 Nerd Skulls. All right, so I got to read Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 10. I love this series. This has been so cool. We get to see what happened with Shredder and Master Splinter and sort of what Shredder has planned for everything. They really go into the whole reincarnation thing, that they both remember each other from their past lives, and it looks like they're just getting ready to battle it out again. The Turtles are still looking for Splinter. They're really close to finding everything. I can't wait to see what happens next. I'm giving this 5 out of 5 Nerd Skulls.
Hey guys, Patrick here. I'm reviewing XMen Legacy 267. This is the crossover between X-Men versus Avengers. This is where the Avengers come to the mansion in the XMen Legacy book. And when I say Avengers, I use that term kind of loosely. I mean, this is the B Squad. This is not Cap. This is not, you know, full on everybody, the Hulk and everything like that. You get Iron Man, Moon Knight, She-Hulk, and Falcon in this book. They should have sent more people, honestly. I mean, if you've been reading X-Men Legacy, you know that Rogue has taken a very personal and very hands-on approach to the students of Jean Grey's School of Gifted Youngsters. And basically what happens here is they come in and they kind of threaten the students. So Rogue goes all out for this one. She does whatever it takes to fend off these quote-unquote trespassers at her house. And in this book, you get a chance to actually see how Rogue manages her powers. If you remember Rogue from the beginning and from the early stages in the 90s, you know how Rogue had extreme issues with her powers. And now in the X-Men Legacy books, we've seen how she's become more in control of them, she's had more control over them, and in many cases does them better than most of the mutants know how to do it themselves. Without giving too much away, the book was awesome, the artwork was awesome. I suggest this to anybody who has been reading the X-Men versus Avengers title, and anybody who is a fan of the Legacy books. I give this 4 out of 5 Nerd Skulls.
So the true adventure begins in Superman Family Adventures number 1. Art Baltazar's art is amazing in this book, and the book just is perfect. It's the perfect comic book that you want to read to your kids, but really even secretly to yourself. It moves along really fast, really funny jokes, and quick to the next point. I love this book. It's really kiddie, but every adult would love this if you like comic books, just because of you can see the obvious jokes about comic books in the industry in this comic. So I'd pick it up. I'm going to give it 5 out of 5 Nerd Skulls. Next up, I got Supercrooks number 3, Mark Millar, Lionel Francis Yu. I've been talking about this book the last couple months, and I think the last issue I started to hate on it a little bit. It's really reminiscent of Ocean's 11, a little bit too much as it was last month, but this issue, it really takes it really far. Mark Millar shines in this. He really shows and reminds us how far he really goes with his books and how bloody they really get, and how dangerous the villains are in his titles. So this actually made me fear for the characters' lives, even though they're fictional characters. So I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 Nerd Skulls. So America's Got Powers #2 came out this week. If you remember my review from last month, I really wasn't liking where the book was going. I really am not fond of Brian Hitch's artwork in most cases. This one, it's not too terrible, but I didn't like where the story was going in the first issue, and I didn't like how it was an obvious parody to the Hunger Games. The second issue reminds you that the main character is in a lot of trouble and he's trying to save his family. He's there against his will, and you really want to see how he's going to pull it off. But interestingly enough, it's about a character that, that does not have superpowers, and he's kind of being pitted against other people with superpowers, and at the last second he finds out he does indeed have superpowers. So he might be able to make it out alive and save his family. I want to see where this book is going, so I strongly suggest it. Check it out. I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 Nerd Skulls. Next up, we got Grim Leaper #1. Yes, that's Grim Leaper. It's created by Curtis Weeb. You know that name because he's been putting out titles left and right. The art in this one is consistently good. The writing is really good. I really like this title a lot because it's a very interesting story. A person dies, wakes up in a whole different body, and he has to kind of figure out what he has to do before he dies again. And the interesting thing is he finds another person that has the same thing, a woman, so of course he falls in love. So it's like an interesting love story within death. Gloomy, of course, but I liked it a lot, so I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 Nerd Skulls.
Hey guys, this is Haley with my review of Animanl Man Annual #1. And I have to say, if you are looking for specifically an appearance from Animanl Man, this may not be your book. Buddy Baker is in it for all of 1 page, but I still thought it was a really interesting story. It kind of tells a similar story to what has been happening to Buddy Baker to someone previously, and how Swamp Thing had to come and save, and kind of showing you what's gonna happen. So I thought it was cool, but it was, it was an annual, so it was a filler story. But I enjoyed it. I'm gonna give it 3.5 Nerd Skulls.
Hey there guys, Cubby here with my comic reviews this week. I got to read Batman Beyond Unlimited #4, What a Ride. This book is a really, really awesome take on not only the series, but kind of trying to tie in a little bit of what goes on in the actual DC universe, giving it more of a comic book feel. It's straying a lot from that animated feel for me, at least for me. Maybe it's the art, maybe it's just the way it's presented. Either way, it's still translating pretty well. It's a great book. This issue, particularly, they find themselves on New Genesis trying to fight off Cobra. It seems like they've unleashed a giant force of nature against not only Earth, but pretty much like the universe. And it's got some pretty big players actually working together and doing a lot of things you would never see in the regular comic universe. So it's really awesome. I really, really enjoy this. I definitely recommend it to anyone. Not only was the art really, really pretty to look at, but the story was well paced and it actually made sense, even being issue #4 and not having read anything else besides watching the animated series. So definitely check it out. I'm giving this 3.5 Nerd Skulls. All right, I got to read Ravagers #1 this week, and I know a lot of people were excited for this book. I kind of was stoked for it. I love Ravager, the last one, Rose Wilson. She's one of my favorite characters, and I was a little disappointed with what they did with her in the New 52. And I gotta say, I'm still disappointed. I didn't like this book at all. This book just kind of didn't make sense. For being a #1, you have to have already read 9 issues of Teen Titans, which, if you're reading Teen Titans, that's awesome. Teen Titans isn't a great book, though. It's a terrible book, in my opinion. So I'm not reading it. I have no idea what's going on. Once you get around halfway through, though, it doesn't really matter. Everything kind of makes sense at that point, but when you start it, you're pretty much flying blind. Other than that, that's one thing. Just the story didn't really get me there. Like, Beast Boy was in there, Terror was in there, Ravager was in there as well, and it just didn't have that same feel. It didn't feel like a DC comic at all. It didn't even feel like a Wildstorm comic in terms of being a little quirky and crazy. It just felt like mistrust was being thrown around, and there was just weird plot devices and things that just didn't make sense for this story. I might be talking out of my ass, but I don't know. It didn't click with me. I didn't get an emotional attachment to this book, so I'm only gonna give it 1.5 Nerd Skulls.
All right, that is all the comic reviews we have for you this week, but until next week, be sure to check us out on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and nerdlocker.com for all your nerdy news. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Cubby.
We'll see you next week for more comic reviews.